Fire burn and cauldron bubble. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, upon the heath there to meet.
Here, Watson, if I'm not very much mistaken, is our next client. Come.
Is one of you gentlemen Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
I am, and this is my colleague, Dr. Watson. And whom do I have the honour of addressing?
I am the King of Nova Alba.
Surely I've seen you before, Your Majesty.
I think not. It is my first time in London, although I did pass by your house yesterday to get the perfect spy of the time it would take to get here from my hotel.
Ah, that must be it. And you say you are the King of Nova Alba?
Nova Alba, that violent vastness in the North Atlantic. The man before us had become king after a power struggle in which his predecessor, King Duncan, had been murdered. And everyone apart from King himself and his wife had also been murdered or gone into exile.
Nova Alba is a country which is much misunderstood. I've been on the throne for 10 difficult years, but my country is now so at peace that I was able to go to Rome to meet the Pope. I've never yet been crowned king. I went to meet the Pope to ask him to perform my coronation, for Nova Alba is a Roman Catholic land.
And what was His Holiness's response?
He declined my request, stating that I am the prime suspect in the killing of King Duncan.
And what was your response to that?
Well, I asked how I might clear my name to his satisfaction. He suggested I set up a court of Alban noblemen to try me. If they find me innocent, he will come to Nova Alba and crown me king. I would like you to investigate the killing of King Duncan and present your findings to the court.
And? Did you kill Duncan?
No, sir, I did not.
And was your statement to that effect insufficient to persuade the Pope of your innocence?
When a man is murdered in his host's house and as a result the host acquires a man's land, titles and fortune, suspicion against the host is a very natural reaction.
Does anyone else know of this plan?
No, sir. I discussed it with His Holiness, who suggested your name himself.
Tell me about the night of Duncan's death.
I thought my life had reached its zenith when King Duncan came to my castle. He just made me Thane of Cawdor for my part in defeating a Norwegian invasion. He came with his 2 sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and with another nobleman, Banquo, who'd also played a major part in the battle, and with Banquo's son, Fleance. After much revelling, we retired to bed at midnight. It was a tempestuous night, and I went for a walk around the castle to soothe my nerves. I came across Banquo and Fleance. Banquo gave me a ring, which he says was a gift from the king to my wife. Well, sir, not yet at rest, he said. The king's abed. He hath been an unusual pleasure, and sends forth great largesse to your offices. With this diamond he greets your wife withal. Took this ring. My valet found it in my pocket the next day, and people assumed I'd either taken it from the king in a struggle or robbed it when we discovered his body. Banquo, Fleance and I talked for a spell, and then I retired to bed. The next morning, we found King Duncan's room as a flesher's. The king lay dead in a pool of blood.
Who was in the castle the night of the murder?
The castle had ramparts, a central courtyard, and a fortified tower where the most senior people slept. Apart from the people in the tower, the porter who controlled access to the tower, there was an outer ramparts, and then there was a moat crossed by a drawbridge and approached by an avenue of beech trees.
So, unless an intruder got in and escaped undetected, the killer must be one of these.
That is so. The king, his 2 sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, my wife and I, Banquo and Fleance. But the ground level floor rooms were used for storage and had arrow slits for windows, so an intruder as killer is unlikely.
Where are these people now?
My wife is no longer with us. Malcolm and Donalbain fled to England. We had heard that they were mustering a rebel army, but Nothing more was ever heard of them. Banquo and Flounce also fled soon after.
Tell me about these people.
Malcolm and Donalbain were in their 20s and loyal, dutiful sons. Banquo is, or was, the same age as me, a noble soul and a fine warrior. Flounce was 14 and a bright, charming lad.
So what is there for me to investigate? You've been on the throne for 10 years. Your wife is no longer with us. Your political rivals, and hence the possible perpetrators of the crime, have all fled. The castle and its environs, which might have been clues to the events, no longer exist.
My people, I need the affirmation of His Holiness. I will do all a man can do to clear my name. He who dares do more is none.
How long are you in London for?
I'm staying in the Langham Hotel, although I may have to change my quarters because my sleep is continuously disturbed by demonstrators in Portland Place. If I do move, I will send you my contact details.
Demonstrators? What are they demonstrating about?
Oh, I haven't given the matter much thought, but there seems to be one parade after another marching past.
I shall look into the matter. I shall require the ring your associate Lord Banquo gave you on the night of the killing.
May this ring give you clues 10 years after the events of which we've spoken? I shall not rest while Mr. Holmes doth investigate the murder of King Duncan while a guest under my roof. I shall return on the morrow to hear of your progress in this disquisition, good sir.
His Majesty is not the only person in London with a lively interest in who killed his predecessor. I had thought to tax His Majesty with this document while he was here, but I thought I might learn more if I did not. Read you the section marked in red, good doctor. I warn you, it's written in the same extravagant style that the king used when he quoted his associate, Lord Banquo.
The wife of the Thane of Cawdor. Alack, I am afraid they have a weight, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark, I laid their daggers ready, he could not miss 'em. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. Enter the Thane of Cawdor. My husband, the Thane of Cawdor. I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? Where did you get this? Whoever wrote it is accusing the present king of Duncan's murder.
I found it in the letterbox marked for my attention yesterday morning. Even though I do not believe it was from the king, that was how I deduced that he'd been here previously. I know nothing more about it, other than it was delivered by hand, as there was neither stamp nor postmark on the envelope.
So someone intimately connected with the court of Nova Alba has tracked the king to our door.
That is so. The play covers the same events as those just described to us by the king. So the victory in battle over the Norwegians, the arrival of King Duncan at Dunsinane Castle, the revelling till late, the storm, the encounter between the present king, Lord Banquo, and Lord Banquo's son Flounce on the castle ramparts after midnight, and then the discovery of the king's body in the morning.
And are there any differences from the king's account?
As you heard, this version of events portrays the killing as having been carried out by the present king, goaded on by his now deceased wife. And there are other differences too. Here, rather than fleeing, Lord Banquo is murdered by agents of the present king, and departing from the implausible to the impossible, his son Flounce apparently takes to the skies to flee. Lord Banquo's last words to his son are, "Fly, good Flounce, fly." And then Banquo is horribly slain.
And which version of events do you believe?
The present king is putting his throne at risk by submitting himself to this trial. He could just have remained on the throne and let the suspicion of having murdered his predecessor hang over him.
So what motivates the writer of this accusatory drama?
Someone wants to discredit the king and trailed him here to do so.
What make you of this second person?
His presence in London is unknown to the present king. He must be a man of education to be writing in the extravagant style of this play. And he wishes the present king ill.
And your next move?
I cannot avoid the conclusion, good doctor, that Duncan's killer is in London. We have the present king. We have this play. We have armies of unidentified marchers in Portland Place. That covers all the suspects. I will continue the investigation further in the morning. Thank you for rescuing me, Watson. I'd gone out early to buy newspapers and cigarettes when this beauty struck. I'm not sure I'd have beaten him in a fight on my own.
My army service pistol has never been bested.
Who are you? Are you Lord Banquo?
How do you know that?
I am Sherlock Holmes. I know what other men do not.
What do you want with me?
I was going to ask you the same question.
I came here to tell you to keep your dirty hands off my son.
Léonce?
I'm surprised you know his name.
Only because I realise you are Lord Banquo.
I followed Léonce here, so I know you know him.
Sir, I've not met your son. I know you have a son. I do not know where he is, nor what he looks like. Why do you think I should know him?
My son has a taste for irregular company, which I abominate. He's been behaving very strangely over the last few days. I followed him to your door, and I saw him put something through your letterbox. Later, I saw you come out the house and take the letter out the box, so I know you know him.
I received a document through my door. I did not know it was from your son, of whom I repeat, I know nothing. I have no idea from whom it was. Now, you tell me what you know about the death of King Duncan of Nova Alba.
No one's spoken about that to me for 10 years. What's it got to do with you?
Sir, you're with the prisoner who answers the questions.
Very well. But there's no much to tell. I am from Nova Alba. 10 years ago, we defeated the Norwegians in battle. I was invited to Dunsinane Castle by one of the heroes of the Battle of Thane of Cawdor. I went with my son, Léonce. King Duncan was there with his two sons, Malcolm and Dunalbane. We revelled till late and then retired to the central fortified part of the castle to which only we were permitted access. During the night, there was a violent storm. I went for a walk around the castle and I met my son Léonce had also been disturbed by the storm. We crossed the path of Cawdor. What's that? Not yet at rest, I said. The king's abed. He hath been an unusual pleasure. And we found King Duncan's body in the morning.
And what did you do next?
I did not know what to do. The likeliest killers were Cawdor and the sons of Duncan. But the sons of Duncan fled straight after their father's body was discovered. Léonce and I fled in a hot air balloon, as I was sure that Cawdor, who'd taken the throne, would have me arrested and put on trial.
And that is all?
All?
Why, sir, do you not mention this?
Where did you get that?
No, sir, where did you get that?
I haven't seen that ring since the night of the murder.
Where did you get it then, I say?
It was given to me by King Duncan.
Why did King Duncan give you the ring?
He thought I had a taste for glittering baubles. He He pressed it on me.
He pressed it on you?
He made it very hard for me to refuse it.
How did you feel having it pressed on you?
I felt humiliated, sir.
How humiliated?
My pride was sore wounded.
Anything else?
As my pride was sore wounded, so I wounded him sore.
You stabbed him.
Aye.
I think I see how the court cards are falling. Where is Fleance now?
He's at my house, in the cellar. I locked him in there before I came to see you.
Sir, you have no right to keep your son in detention. Watson, go to get a cab. We must this man's house presently to free his son Fleance.
My house is near Maidenhead, Mr. Holmes. I feel the justice of what you say. I only wanted to stop him mixing in company, not meat for a man. Besides, I have another son now, for I have remarried. He had a difficult birth, with a forceps delivery.
None born of woman shall harm the king. The king shall never vanquished be, until great Baron of Wood to hide Dunsinane Hill shall come.
It's all right. I know everything.
Everything?
I know that you, Fleance, killed King Duncan at Dunsinane Castle 10 years ago. And I know that you only did it when the king's friendship towards you turned to lust.
As my king was fought and I rejoiced in heart. As he was my king, I honoured and obeyed him. But when his favour turned to licentiousness, I slew him. I struck with my ceremonial dagger when he called me into his chamber and advanced on me. I meant no more than to frustrate his pursuit of unusual pleasure, but my blow was a sore dunt which struck home far harder than I'd intended. He died in an instant. I left him, joined my father, and gave him the diamond ring the king had given me as token of his favour. My father then passed the ring to Codor. When we met him walking around the castle, he said it was a present for his wife.
Why do you put a copy of your play through my door?
My father had always told me I'd become king of Nova Alba. I'd heard the Pleasant King was in Rome, looking to clear his name of suspicion of having murdered Duncan. And you would come through London to get home and guessed he would see an independent investigator. I followed him off the boat train to the Langham Hotel, and then again when he went out. When I saw him check out your address, I knew it was an obvious step to implicate him by having my play about the death of Duncan put into your hands, and my version my father murdered to make sure that no false suspicion fell upon him.
Why does your father think you will become king of Nova Alba?
He'd often talked about meetings with wild women after the battle with the Norwegians. They'd foretold Codor's ascent to the throne and said that my father would be the father of kings.
Sir, I've not had a son. If I had had a son, I could not blame him for acting as yours did in the circumstances that he faced. And in those circumstances, I would not rule out taking blame for a crime that he had committed. But you should encourage his interest in poetry, not lock him in the cellar.
I feel the justice of what you say. What is to happen now?
The case is but half done. I must to London to parley with the king.
We shall not spend a great expense of time before we explain to you the events just seen, and so make us even with you. But Banquo confessed. Why then do you believe his confession false, and why do you think that Fleance was the real killer?
While political ambitions were the most obvious motive for the crime, they were not the only one. There were, in fact, 4 suspects aside from the king and his wife. They were Banquo, Donalbain, Malcolm and Fleance, but it was Banquo who crossed our path first. Banquo confessed, but when he did so, I felt I had to ask myself some questions. How likely was it that King Duncan would make advances to a burly soldier who could defend himself? How much more likely was he to make such advances to a slender lad who perhaps could not?
Villain.
How likely was it that a man of Lord Banquo's stamp would be impressed by a ring with a glittering stone? How much more likely, how much better calculated was it to appeal to a callow youth with a head full of poetry?
Scoundrel.
I felt I had at least to test the hypothesis that Banquo's confession was covering for his son. And when I heard that his son had been locked in the cellar, the opportunity to tax him with the crime was too good to miss. I saw how readily Fleance confessed.
And what will you say to the king when he comes?
I shall explain to him what I found. He may not want all the matters we've uncovered to come out, but I expect he will still want the trial to go ahead. But once you find one case of this type at such a senior level society, you never know how many more there are. It's sometimes hard even to find a competent and independent judge.
Mm. The nobleman of the court of Nova Alba declared a verdict of not proven against the king on the charge of murdering King Duncan. A verdict of not guilty was withheld as the actual killer could not be identified. But this was enough for the Pope to come to Nova Alba and play a small part in the coronation. Hence the story of the Vatican Cameos. The king reigned for another 20 years before abdicating and was replaced by Lulac, Banquo's second son, who after a difficult birth had grown to be a strapping lad. And to commemorate his coronation, as a resident for many years, Maidenhead Borough Council sent a gift of saplings from the famous Burnham beeches up to Dunsinane to replace the avenue destroyed in the Second Norwegian invasion. So, Burnham Wood really did come to Dunsinane.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen. What a wonderful performance. We're going to go into actor Q&A now. So we're opening up to the chat window. So anybody who's watching from around the world, please fire in your questions. Please let us know who the question is for. Is it for Sherlock Holmes? Is it for Banquo? Is it for Dr. Watson? Or is it for
Change my name.
You can also ask questions from the King of Nova Alba, of course. So we do have a first question from Helen. which is there a Macbeth or Edward II influence here? And this is Orlando.
Well, clearly this is a retelling of Macbeth. Macbeth was written by Shakespeare. King James I of England and VI of Scotland claimed descent from Fleance. So the play was designed to blacken Macbeth's name. It was Macbeth and Fleance were political rivals. There's clearly a bit of Edward II in here. Edward II is a play by Christopher Marlowe. As people will know, Edward II comes to a very, very sticky end indeed. But this is much more Shakespeare. There's lots of lines of Shakespeare, not just of Macbeth, buried in this play. I changed the name to Nova Alba simply so that I felt the name Macbeth has been subject of so many jokes over the years that I didn't want to include the name Macbeth in the play, but obviously this is the story of Macbeth and it's an alternative telling of it.
Fantastic. So Gary is asking the question from Fleance. Can you tell us how old the character of Fleance is, and also how old is the actor playing Fleance?
Well, I'm 23, just turned 23, and Fleance, I believe, is 14, 15.
But he was when it happened.
What?
Yeah, so it's 10 years old.
So
It
now
difficult working out who'd play who'd play Fleance.
Yeah. I don't think I could have played any of the parts. Yeah, so he was 14, 15 when the event with the king happened, and now he's roughly my age, so it worked out perfectly, yeah.
Fantastic. And a question from Susie. How do you find performing the play on Zoom? And that's to all of you. So maybe we'll start with Orlando.
Well, I've only played once before on stage. I think I'd rather bow to to Dr. Watson, King of Nova Alba and Banquo and Fleance on that one. I think they've got a much better way of, they're much better placed to decide which they prefer than I am.
It's very different. I think it's quite difficult because you're not seeing somebody close to you and feeling an audience around you, and the links aren't quite as speedy. So you sometimes worry a bit about cutting in or having to leave gaps that you might not otherwise do. And also on the Zoom thing, there's also lots of things that distract you, like if your jacket starts to disappear or if the lights go slightly. So it's a very different experience, but I have to say a lot of fun.
Yeah, and actually a positive thing, obviously, because of lockdown, which probably many countries have had, theatres have obviously been closed for months and months and months. So to actually be able to perform a live play is really exciting and a real privilege.
Yeah, and I've only done one of these sort of things before, and that was just a rehearsed reading. But I think maybe we could get more used to doing this kind of thing because it works really well. All we have to do is just log in and then we're away. We don't have to go anywhere and meet up. So hopefully this sort of thing may well be, the future for certainly a few months, I expect. But it keeps theatre alive, I suppose. And I think this industry is so good at adapting, and I think we've adapted quite well, given the circumstances.
So a lovely comment from Margaret. It's not really a question, but she says, I must admit, I'm amazed at how you've met up the challenge on Zoom. The continuity and the dialogue flowed. I forgot for a while that I was on Zoom, which is fantastic.
That's nice.
A few people are throwing in some questions on the Q&A as well. So we have two windows now that I'm opening up. Lucy says, why are you launching a book of plays while we're in lockdown?
That's a good question. Obviously, I hope that these plays will get into the theatre at some point. But actually, I think the book which I've got here, which comes out today, the book I think can appeal to several different audiences, because I think that they're all based on my stories. I've been writing the redacted Sherlock Holmes for 6 years. If you want a compressed version of my stories, the plays do it. They're about half the length or a third of the length of the stories. I hope we've demonstrated they work quite well on Zoom. that they have been done in the theatre. So this play was first put on at with John with John Constant starring as Banquo and the King of Nova Alba in Tolworth 2 years ago. So the plays are for a minimum of 3 players. They can go up to 10 or 12 players. There's a witches' chorus in this one. One of the other plays is the first new Greek tragedy for 2,500 years. That has a chorus as well, so you can have a large number of parts. There's scope for doubling up parts. So I think that this is good for amateur theatre groups, for theatres, and for schools. So I'm hoping that they will sell widely there.
Chris has asked a question. How did the 4 of you get together?
It wasn't a lengthy audition process, let's put it that way.
I tell you, I can go back a little bit further than you can, Miss Doctor, because the Orlando's play actually was selected for a one-act play festival that I was helping to organise, and it was one of the plays selected to be performed. This is a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
And so that's really why it started. That's how I was cast in that, so I got to know Orlando through that, and then I don't know if the others want to kind of finish off the story, really.
So with John and with Nigel as our brilliant sound man, this play was performed at Conan Doyle's old house, Undershaw, in October of last year. And that was a 3-man version. And then we were going to do it in the summer, and then my internet at home packed up. So we weren't able to do it in the summer. And we then cast around. It works better as a 4-man production. And we were very lucky to get Matt and Jonty to appear in this production. So this play's now had 3 different productions, and it's been really, they've all been slightly different. In the first production at the Tolworth Arts Centre at the Corner House Theatre in Tolworth, John Constant played with 2 ladies who played Holmes and Watson. And now obviously we're not 2 ladies, and I think it shows the flexibility. You know, I am following the footsteps of a quite good dramatist, a great dramatist, a great prose writer.
And I think,
and I give a shout out to.
No, go for it, Matt.
No, I'm going to give a shout out to Claire, who let me know about it and put me in contact with the team. So thank you, Claire. You got me involved.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is it's actually quite nice just to be able to do rehearsals on Zoom as well. So you know, you're not necessarily having to travel to find somewhere to do, you know, and find a rehearsal space. Actually, it works really smoothly. It's I'd never even heard of Zoom until lockdown. So you know, it's become part of daily life almost.
Yeah.
And a question from Elisa from Brussels. It really enjoyed the play. Are you all in the same place, or are you in your own homes?
Well, we could change our backgrounds, couldn't we?
No, we haven't got together physically. We've never been in the same room together at any stage. We've done all our rehearsals on Zoom. Everything's been done during the lockdown, during the pandemic.
Yeah, so we're all in our own places.
So for those who know London, Jonathan and Matt are south of London in Leatherhead. Jonty is in Alton, which is on the Surrey-Hampshire border, and I'm in southwest London, and so is Nigel.
And a question from Erica. Orlando, will you be performing any more plays like this on Zoom?
I hope so. We've got this book, which I cannot recommend too highly. It has five plays and a sketch, and A Scandal in Nova Alba is the first play in the book, and I would like to do the second play in the book at the end of February. I'm hoping that I can persuade my fellow actors to take part. It's called The Baron of Wimbledon. It's set in the 1930s. There are no witches in it, but it does have a role for Hermann Goering. So it does deal with real life people once again. I would love to do it with my fellow cast. It actually would fit quite well with. It needs a lady to take part. It needs 4 men and a woman to play it. So I'd love to do that one next, perhaps at the end of February.
So is that a casting call out to our attendees for a female actress to play?
We need a female she needs to be in her 50s roughly. She needs to be glamorous. The woman who plays the role needs to be able to sweep men off their feet. Wow.
Okay, so we're asking for all of the ladies on the call. Are you in your 50s and are you glamorous? So that's a great question. Gary has a question. Do you have to memorize all of your lines, or because it's on Zoom, can you reverence them since you're not in a theatre?
For me, I think if you're going to do it, you should learn the lines so that you make it as natural as possible, and that's what we've all done.
Yeah. And also because we find through rehearsals that your eyes need to be pretty steady. If you start flicking around, looking up and down, and referring to script, it kind of breaks the spell. It's a little bit like close-up telly. You need to keep quite still and quite steady. So unless we had auto cue or something running up, we wouldn't have a hope.
So do you want us to tell you which lines we got wrong?
No.
Take too long.
No, let's not go there. He says hastily, knowing it was him.
So another lovely comment from Mariah. She says this play would work very well as the Shore Festival luncheon play in the Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, in Canada.
I'm up for that.
I'm up for that.
Yeah,
we're happy to do a Zoom, but we'll do another Zoom version. If anyone who would like a Zoom version broadcast to them, we can do it.
Fantastic. So Mariah, feel free to reach out to us after the event and let us know. I'm sure the guys would love to perform in Ontario, probably virtually, I would suggest.
For the moment.
For the moment.
Sadly.
Feel free to throw any more questions into the chat or into the Q&A. Another question is, who is the narrator?
Well, I think in this role, I think Dr. Watson did the narration. Dr. Watson does the address to the audience to keep the action moving. I think one of the advantages of doing this is that people know the story of Macbeth, and this is just a variant on the story of Macbeth. But the next play I'd like to do is a much less well-known story, and there's a much bigger role for Watson as the narrator to fill in the gaps where the audience probably doesn't know what happened next.
So the clarification is, who's the person asking the questions? Yeah, I suppose I haven't announced myself. So my name is Steve. I'm the founder of MX Publishing. So we are hosting the event. So apologies, I should have introduced myself. Ty Leach says, your February production, Orlando, will we be able to put that up so that people can sign up for it? What's the next production? We'll
have to agree dates. But when I spoke to John C, we thought about end of February. 28th of February is a Saturday. If my fellow cast members are up for it and we can find a lady to play, then let's do it.
Fantastic. Chris has commented, this has been fantastic. As Matt says, it's keeping theatre alive. It's not something I would normally do, and I love the live Q&A as well. Please tell us when the next one is. So it sounds like the public is asking you, Orlando, to... Well,
that's very, very flattering.
Yeah.
I do think... Holmes was obviously very successful. Sherlock Holmes was very successful as a character in a short story, but actually it was a lot of Elementary Day Watson comes from the first great actor who played Sherlock Holmes, a man called William Gillette. So Holmes has always been on the stage, And Steve has told me that that Sherlock Holmes has been portrayed on stage or on film more often than any other person, living or fictional. I'm not, as we got him with in Nazi Germany in the 1930s, our next play, I'm not at all convinced Sherlock Holmes is fictional anyway. But there's Holmes has made his way on the stage. I think it lends itself quite well. I think it lends itself quite well to a Zoom production because it is mostly dialogue. So I think it does lend itself to people to a Zoom production or radio production.
And another nice comment from Gary. I've never been to the theatre, but I find this very enjoyable. So I guess Zoom is opening up, and maybe the silver lining from the lockdown is that it's bringing theatre style productions to a new audience.
Yeah, and if that encourages Gary to go to the theatre as soon as he can, he'll love every minute of it.
Fantastic. So we have a short interview planned now for Orlando, but we open looking forward to the February play already, says James. No pressure. Live theatre, some actors have found Holmes a difficult character to play. Orlando, how have you got on with being Holmes?
Well, I'm not an experienced actor in the way that my colleagues are. I found it quite tough, actually. I find learning the lines quite tough, and I find standing up on stage or doing this quite tough. But I've really enjoyed it. It gives me a new insight. It's great playing with such good players. That they've been very supportive, and I'm sure if we can do more of it, then we'll do it better and better. So no, it's a great opportunity to be able to play Sherlock Holmes.
And Ty Leach is commenting that I love the idea of the Q&A. It's something you rarely get, or you don't get when you go to the theatre. It is rare. I've been to opening nights before, where you go afterwards. A select bunch of people get to go backstage and have a Q&A with the actors, but it's not something that's done normally. So it sounds like Q&A is a prerequisite for future performances, Orlando.
I think so. I think that's. I think actually I've been able to talk quite a lot about the play, and the actors, my fellow actors, have been able to talk about it too, which is really good. So I think that I think a Q&A. We'll have another if we do Baron of Wimbledon at the end of February. We'll do another Q&A.
Fantastic. Good. So I think we'll thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Dr. Watson, King of Over Alba and Flayance. Thank you very much. We're going to have a short interview with Orlando now.
You want the competition, Steve? Do you want to do the? Have you got
before we go into the interview, does anybody want to have a crack on the chat window and tell us how many people on the cover you were able to identify, and we can see if we can get this signed copy. 6 from Walter. Ooh. Okay, can anybody beat 6?
No.
If that's pretty good.
Sorry. Really impressive.
That's good.
Providing they're correct.
Okay, so if we don't have any advances on 6 from Walter, Madeline says I only got one of them. I hope that was Sherlock Holmes, Madeline, because he's on the cover. Yeah, Shakespeare was on there too. I got 2. But let's see if anybody else can match, can up 6.
Can you put the picture up again?
I will put the picture up. Okay, so Walter said, okay, Sherlock has put 6 up. Let's see if anybody else wants to see if they can get more than 6.
We turn our cameras off so you can make it bigger. Would that help?
No, that's okay. I think it's quite big on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got 6 from Walter. So I think we're going to go for Walter. Can you tell us one at a time so that we get some suspension? So not suspension, some suspense. What's the first one, Walter? Now we have to see how fast Walter can type, by the way. Arthur Conan Doyle.
Not quite.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Maybe 5. We didn't think the typing time through, did we, gents? Shakespeare and Sherlock.
Well, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Two. Edward Elgar.
Ah.
Not on this occasion. Not on this one. No.
Ah.
Ah,
Not
okay.
Edward Elgar. I did mention one of them. I mentioned this
Okay,
gentleman here.
Martin. Yeah, Martin thinks he's got 4.
Go on then.
Walter says
No.
Winston Churchill.
No, he's in one of my other stories, but not in this book.
Okay, so Walter has 2. Martin, can you steal it at the last? It's a 2-horse race now.
Gottfried von Cram, very good. That's
Well done.
Wow, how do you know that?
Wow.
I
Okay.
thought that was Fred Perry.
Okay, Martin has gone Sherlock, Mycroft, Shakespeare, Isambard Kingdom, Brunel.
That's correct. That's the gentleman down here.
Yeah.
Rosie thinks she's got the 5th. Come on, Rosie. What have you got? Who's the 5th?
Who's the lady?
Well, the person who said Arthur Conan Doyle was very close with on the ladies. So that might give you a bit of a clue.
I think Rosie might steal it here.
Is that his wife?
His second wife, yeah.
His
she's
second
called-
wife.
She
Ah.
was called Jean Leckie, and obviously she became Jean Conan Doyle.
Lady Constance.
No, she became, I presume because Arthur Conan Doyle was knight, she became Lady Conan Doyle, I would guess.
Mm.
I think we've probably got a tie. I think we've got a 3-way tie here. I think we're going to go Martin, Rosie, and Walter. So
Okay.
and we're going to have 3 winners. So
Okay, that sounds very good.
So Rosie, Martin, and Walter. Afterwards, we'll collect your details and we'll get your signed copy sent out to you. We're going to switch to the Q&A now.
Well, a very important question from Chris there. Don't know if you saw that. Steve.
Yeah, where can we get the book? So you can get it from all good outlets. So you can get it from Amazon and Book Depository, and of course from the MX Publishing website as well. If you do get it from the MX Publishing website, we will also be funding some books for our project in Kenya, which is the Happy Life Children's Home. So when you buy books on our site, we also fund school books for the kids in Kenya.
Okay.
Right, we're going to switch across to the interview. So thanks again to the King of Nova, Alba, John, and Dr. Watson and Flounce. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Take care now.
Guys.
Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Speak soon, everybody.
So, Orlando, are you ready for some additional questions, sir?
I am, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to switch to pull up my questions. So, where are you performing from, Orlando?
Well, I'm in Southwest London. My fellow actors were dotted around the outskirts of London. Nigel, who I see is still on, lives about a mile away from where I do. So we're quite a Southwest London sort of corner.
I think this play marks the start of a bit of a new direction for the redacted Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've done 31 short stories now, and they do lend themselves quite well to they do lend themselves quite well to dramatization because they are dialogues or multi conversations. So I think turning them into plays was quite a natural step, and I'm hoping that they'll be of interest to drama groups.
Fantastic. So we had the competition at the beginning of the show for people to name the people on the cover. I guess we've seen that what gives away the game a little bit is Shakespeare, which several people recognised. What's the link between Holmes and Shakespeare?
Well, I think that there's a man in America who's helped me a lot. writes the Holmes literati, Dan Victor, and he links Holmes with great writers, and I try to do the same. So this is Shakespeare. The man in the top left here is Sigmund Freud, another great writer, obviously known as a psychologist. He wrote extensively as well. I've linked Sherlock Holmes with Franz Kafka, but I've created a Greek play out of Sherlock Holmes. So one of my plays is a double play. It's the story of the a case of identity, and I've linked that to a famous theory by Sigmund Freud. It's called a case of complex identity, and it's the first Greek tragedy for 2,500 years, and it's got a Greek chorus in it. I think that Holmes does lend itself to mixing with great literature.
And the figure on the top right?
Yeah, that's Godfrey von Cram, who Wout has identified. He was he won Wimbledon. He got to finals of Wimbledon 3 times. He won the French Open twice. He is when you get to see the play at the end of February, you'll see that he got up to all sorts of other things as well. And he got into trouble with the Nazis, and I won't say why or what happened, but he is a remarkable man. I think he was a hero in an unheroic time and place, and I think people will enjoy seeing the story, and they'll learn something new about Sherlock Holmes as well, about something to build out the background of Sherlock Holmes.
And is that Hermann Göring?
It is. Yes, he's one people. No one got him. Hermann Göring, believe it or not, played in the same tennis club as Gottfried von Cram. So Gottfried von Cram played in a tennis club called Red White Berlin, and Hermann Göring was a member. You may, if you've seen pictures of Hermann Göring, he became quite bloated as he grew old. But he was in fact a fighter ace in the First World War. So he was quite slender once, but became quite gross later. And that also features in my play.
So no question in your mind that Sherlock Holmes was a real person? Yeah,
and there are people who don't think that Sherlock Holmes is a real person, which I find quite strange. And people have to make their own decisions. But the conceit of my redacted Sherlock Holmes is that the events I describe are so extraordinary that can only be explained by the presence of an extraordinary person like Sherlock Holmes. That's why they've been redacted. That's why they're called the redacted plays, because the presence of Sherlock Holmes has been redacted by historians, and I'm just restoring Sherlock Holmes's true presence.
And presumably Mycroft as well, who's also on the cover.
Yeah, Mycroft Holmes is this gentleman here. Mycroft Holmes is the eminence grise of the British government, so he decides British government policy over and over again. And in one of the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Holmes describes his brother as being the British government, because he makes all the decisions. And there's 2 plays in here which cover, which include Mycroft. One is called The Perilous Engagement, and that also features this lady, Jean Leckie, who was Conan Doyle's second wife. And it also features an event involving Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who's on the right here. And people reading it will find that being the British government often leads to having to make some very uncomfortable decisions. And I'm hoping that not everyone will be comfortable with the decisions that Mycroft takes, but it's noticeable that in each case he achieves his purpose. And you might want to judge whether I'm hoping people will be sitting there thinking, well, do the ends justify the means?
And the Bruce Partington diptych?
Yeah, that's a fairly straight redramatization of the Bruce Partington plans. That's the story of the submarine plans, and it's got its sequel, which is called The Sleeper's Cache. So it features what happens in the end to the baddie of the Bruce Partington plans. There's 2 baddies, in fact. One is Valentine Walter, another man is a man called Oberstein. This is about the fate of this story. The Sleeper's Cache is about the fate of Oberstein.
And you mentioned 6 plays earlier, Orlando. I counted you talking about 5 there.
Yes, well, it's always nice to be interviewed by somebody who thinks little things are infinitely the most important. And you're quite right. Anyone who watched An Evening with Sherlock Holmes a month ago would have seen my play, Mr. Devine's Original Problem. And that's a sketch involving Holmes, Watson, and the Almighty. And it only requires 3 people, and that's in this book. I couldn't really put it into the book because I couldn't put it on the cover, because I couldn't really think of a suitable picture of the Almighty that wouldn't cause gross offence. I didn't particularly want to have a crucifixion on the cover. I couldn't think of any other portrayal of the Almighty, so it's not actually there. But those who watched at the end of September will have seen Holmes being commissioned by the Almighty to solve a problem for him.
Fantastic. And I think we'll open it up now to the audience. So in the chat window or the question window, please feel free to fire your final questions through for Orlando before we do the wrap up. We've got one in from Chris already. Orlando, what inspired you to begin the Redacted series?
When I was a student, I read a book by a man called Franz Kafka, which is called The Trial. And it's about a man who is arrested one morning and is put on trial. Eventually, if you read right to the end of the story, you're not quite sure whether he's killed or not, but he's put on trial, but he's never told what the charge is. He's been tried for. And I read it at university and thought this is very strange. And I always thought that the text was quite opaque. I thought there is a real solution to this, and I can find it. And I read a book called The Big Short, which is about the financial crash in 2008-9, and that gave me the clue to what the real reason is why the character Joseph Carr is being put on trial for. And that's what starts me off. So I put Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson into the original Kafka story. It's called The Trial of Joseph Carr. People who know about Kafka have been very kind enough to quite flattering about it. And it does solve what Joseph Carr was being put on trial for. And that's what started me off. And I then, Macbeth was the second thing that I did. So my rewriting of Macbeth was the second short story that I did. And I've done a version of the Oedipus story. I've done a version of the story of the Minotaur. And I've done a story of Death in Venice. I've done a version of the story of Death in Venice and of Cinderella, all in the same story. So I have quite a lot of literary inspirations in my stories.
Great question from JC in France. What was the first Sherlock Holmes adventure you read, and what is subsequently your favourite?
I got mumps when I was 14, and my father said, you're going to have be stuck for things to do, so try reading this. And he gave me the Sherlock Holmes short stories. So the first story I read was A Scandal in Bohemia. And obviously I pinched the scandal in Alba from A Scandal in Bohemia. And it was much too grown up for a 14-year-old to read. It's a very, very grown up story. And I thought, well, I'm not sure about this. And then I read The Red-Headed League. And that's still my favourite story. I think it's the funniest of the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's a very clever story, the brilliant denouement, and it remains the one that I turn to most often. And I try to get my daughters. When my daughter started getting interested in Sherlock Holmes, I encouraged them to read that one first. I think you need to be about 17 or 18 before you understand just what a risque story A Scandal in Bohemia is.
Fantastic. And from Martin, which Sherlock Holmes story would you most like to see turned into a play?
I'd love to see a version of The Hound of the Baskervilles where we have a really good trained hound to do it. I think it's a very hard thing to do. I think The Hound of the Baskervilles may work better on the radio, but the pictures are better on the radio. You can imagine the hound. I do think The Hound of the Baskervilles is a brilliant story.
I have to say, we've published the script of a wonderful adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles that's designed to be performed outdoors in outdoor theatre by a chap called Simon Corbell, and it's actually one of our best-selling books of all time because it's picked up by lots of theatre companies. They do it outside, So the Hound is difficult to do on stage because of the atmosphere of Dartmoor. But if you get outside and you have the night sky behind you, you can create a fantastic atmosphere for the Hound. Gary asked a question: could Sherlock Holmes be a detective in today's time?
Well, there's been the brilliant Sherlock adaptation. I thought that the people who wrote Sherlock loved the original stories. There's all sorts of details in Sherlock which are picked up from the original stories. So there's 17 steps leading up to the flat at Baker Street. There is Sherlock Holmes sits there with 3 nicotine patches on because he can't have a 3-pipe problem. It portrays Sherlock as being a brilliant geek. So he's all over computers and phones. And I do think that it's I do think that it's a brilliant that they did a very good job on catching the details of Holmes. I'm not so keen on the plot, but I think Sherlock Holmes is a man who deduces and will be successful anywhere. I do think that the stories are going to live on forever. I mean, you'll know more about this than me, Steve. Someone's done Sherlock Holmes in space. Someone's done Sherlock Holmes as an animal. Someone's done Swear-a-Lot Holmes. Someone does Sherlock Holmes in Lego. It's infinitely malleable. You really can do things with Sherlock Holmes. I've mixed it with Shakespeare this evening. I've mixed it with Sophocles. I've mixed it with ancient Greek myth, lots of the Bible. So I've had Sherlock Holmes investigate the resurrection and Christmas and climate change. So yes, I think you can do everything with Sherlock Holmes.
Alicia's got a great question. You've based much of the work that you've done on older works of literature, but do current events ever influence you to write stories?
Yeah, just after the Brexit referendum, I did a story where the Prime Minister approaches Sherlock Holmes to try and sort out Brexit. In the story, The Noble Bachelor, Sherlock Holmes dreams of the United States, the United Kingdom become one global country. And he said the flag would be the quartering of the Stars and Stripes and of the Union flag. And obviously at the time, we've heard some news today, so maybe the story isn't quite so relevant. But so Holmes goes off to try to meet a president of the United States who bears a striking resemblance to the man who was president yesterday and will remain president in office until January at least, to try and negotiate the merger of the United Kingdom and the United States. And it proves to be a tough job even for Sherlock Holmes, though he does eventually come up with a resolution. The problem with doing Sherlock Holmes stories about really modern events is that they date quite quickly. So I had a character who bore a striking resemblance to the last British Prime Minister, who obviously is no longer the British Prime Minister. I never named the person's sex for obvious reasons, but it mentioned the then Foreign Secretary, the then Trade Secretary for doing deals with non-EU countries, and the Secretary for Brexit, and they've all left office. So the problem with doing satirical Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Holmes about modern events is events pass very quickly. I have started something on COVID. I haven't got very far with it, so watch out for that. But I do try and have a variety of inspirations.
Follow-up question from Elisa. I would like to make a follow-up question to Elisa's question. What would Sherlock Holmes make of the US election and our new US President, Joseph Biden?
I think it's a bit early for Holmes to form a view on Joseph Biden. In my story, when Theresa May became Prime Minister, she said that Brexit will be a Brexit in red, white and blue. And so my Brexit story is called A Study in Red, White and Blue. And the story features a rather well suntanned president with a rather exotic hairstyle, who and there are lots of slightly risque references to some of the things that Trump is alleged to have got up to in Moscow with the bed in which the Obamas had slept in. I showed it to a friend who discovered my works recently. He'd forgotten all the references. So that is the problem with doing satirical Sherlock Holmes, that it does date very quickly. So I did a story called the Alcock report. That was a notorious report by the British government into the Second Iraq War, and it explored why it was produced in the way that it was and why it took so much time for it to come out. And people have forgotten about the so-called Chilcot report. Now, my one was called the Alcock report. The word Alcock was chosen fairly carefully. It is fun doing satirical stuff, but it does date very quickly, and that's the problem with it. But I wouldn't rule out doing something about how this US presidential election seems to have ended with people trying to storm ballot stations.
Gary's got a great question. Have you ever thought of doing an alien Sherlock Holmes?
Well, I think people have done things like, I haven't done that. My stories, I give Sherlock Holmes a very long life. So the latest one I've got has him in Vienna in 1946. If anyone has ever seen the film The Third Man, there's that was set in Vienna just after the Second World War. And I have Holmes and Watson in Vienna at that time. Other people have done, well, you've seen the Sherlock adaptations. As I said, I've mentioned some of the other ones, and Steve knows more about it than I do, with Holmes being an animal or Holmes being in outer space. I try and keep within the bounds of what might be credible for a man who was born in 1854. So in his last bow, Holmes is described as being about 60. His last bow is set in 1914. That means that Holmes was born in 1854. So 1946 in Vienna it's doable. And I'm writing something with Holmes in Berlin in 1941. So it's doable. But I do try and keep within the bounds of what's plausible given Holmes's known birth date.
Fantastic. I think comment from Gretchen that democracy is a key thing. Holmes believed, like Doyle believed, in the promise of the USA. So I think that's a great point. Opening out for a last couple of questions, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. While we wait for a couple of questions come in the chat window, just a gentle reminder to everybody that if you enjoyed the performance, we have a donation link. The donations go to our two charities, which is Stepping Stone School, which is based at Undershore, which is a school for kids with learning disabilities, and Happy Life Children's Home, which is a home for rescued babies in Kenya. So thank you so much, Orlando, for the performance tonight. It's been a lot of fun, and everybody's really enjoyed it. And judging by all the comments, I think that there's no choice. You have to do something in February. Okay.
Well, I see that Fleance and the King and Banquo, so I've got 3 for the price of 2 are still on. If anyone else, if the other actors, I want to express my thanks to my fellow actors who did a brilliant job. I have enjoyed this evening very much, and we'd love to do something in February.
Fantastic. We just need a glamorous lady in her 50s. So for everybody out there listening, we need a casting call for ladies in their 50s that can sweep men off their feet.
That sounds very good.
Fantastic. I'm going to stop the recording there, guys.
Thanks, everyone.